Whatever that I'm getting here is actually coming from the Bhagavad Gita and the extension of the Bhagavad Gita, which is known as the Srimad Bhagavatam. So whatever that I quote you from here will be from what we call Vedic authority. I think that's important because if I were to sit down here and speculate and give you something, well, it wouldn't hold so much weight. And as lawyers, we are trained to produce evidence which should be at least bona fide. So we try to do that with you, and that's where our source will be coming from. Okay? So that's what I'll try and do. Now, this will be coming from. Okay? So that's what I'll try and do. Now, the topic sounds good. It's ritual or spiritual. That's what Diwali is. By the way, you were seeing just before this, it's a very good production of Krishna. And that was another episode where Krishna actually lives the great hill Govardhan. So Diwali is normally, if you follow the calendar, Diwali in Singapore, public holiday will be on Tuesday. Wednesday is Diwali to many people. And the day after is Diwali to many people. And the day after actually is the day when Krishna lifted the Govardhan hill. So this entire week is supposed to be a very auspicious week, and it's supposed to be very symbolic. So what are rituals? I guess that's the question we all are asking. Normally, if you ask me, rituals would be defined as a set of rules. And when we talk about rules, we are talking about rules which are normally associated with rites and ceremonies. And if you have been a Hindu or if you are practicing in any particular religion, you find that almost every faith has a lot of rituals. So rituals tend to be filled with a lot of movements and sequences and events that you have to do. Even if you're not a believer and you take yourself away from the world of spirit and religion, you'll find that a ritual can apply to anything. Because very often, a ritual is like, well, you brush your teeth in the morning and it becomes a ritual to you. You don't brush your teeth, you don't really feel so good. I don't think anyone wants to leave the house without brushing their teeth. Not just for the hygienic part of it, but for the fact that it just feels complete when you do it, right? Plus, you will save a lot of trouble for the person who's going to talk to you. Apart from that, it is actually and can become a ritual. Sometimes, and by the way, I do commercial law, I do IP law, and I also do a lot of finance law, but I also do family law, which means many married couples who want to divorce come to me. And very often, one of the reasons why they say they want to get divorced is they look at each other and say, after a while, our relationship sounds and feels like a ritual. You know, I just go through the motion of telling you I love you very much. And since you told me I love you, I have to tell you I love you. Otherwise, you know, things are not going to be so good. And things like that. It happens. So very often, ritual it can be anything. It can be something you do every day. And eventually it loses the meaning and the freshness and the beauty with which you started with. And some of us, and many of us, would have felt it at some point. Sometimes my clients say, the first time I met her, I just fell in love with her. And it lasted for about a week. And after that, we got married. And then after that, it wasn't there. And then I've lived on for 10 years with her, but it feels like a ritual. I hear this all the time. Why? Because the moment when it happened, it's normally not a ritual. It's something where your spirit was involved. And therefore, it becomes a spiritual. But when it becomes something that you just keep doing and you don't have your heart into it, then it can become an activity that you faithfully do. You regularly do it. But it doesn't mean you do it because your heart is in it. So it's a very important point. And sometimes, as we say here, rituals become such a routine that we do it. We don't think about it, but we know we need to do it. For example, you may have to do certain things which are highly routine, but you know you have to keep doing it because you bring the money home, for example. How many of us will ever have the good fortune of loving our job and feeling completely spiritual every time we walk in and do our job? Believe me, there are days when I walk into court and I really don't feel very happy, especially when you have a difficult judge. And there are times when I just do something because, well, it brings in the money and I don't put my heart into it. So anything can become a ritual. And very often, things become ritual when we don't understand the symbolism behind it. And that's another aspect that's important. If your mothers and fathers, like my mothers and fathers, also told all of us that, come to temple, do this, do that. When I was young, I would always ask, why should I break a coconut, for example? Why do I have to bow down, for example? Sometimes my mother could explain it, but very often she was too busy. So all she would say is, you have to do it. Okay, if you don't do it, it's not good for you. That's how it was. When I did well for my O-levels, and I tell this to everyone, my father prayed that I would break 108 coconuts in a temple. 108, not one, but 108. Not very easy. Now, when I told him that since you prayed for me, you should be breaking it, right, if it goes well, he said, no, the deal was I prayed very hard for you, but if you did well, you would have to break it. Okay, never mind, there's a variation to the contract, but I did it. But when I asked him why I should break coconuts, he couldn't explain it to me. He just had the faith that if you break it, that's good, but he couldn't explain it to me. But when years later, I understood from scriptures that the coconut, in its full form as a husk, represents one's false ego. Not real ego, but false ego. The ego that you think that you were the one who did so well, that you didn't need anybody's help, anybody's support, that you're your own man, your own island. And when that ego grows and it becomes filled with pride, then what happens is you become intoxicated with it. So when you break a coconut in front of the good Lord, for example, the idea is that you are trying to induce a sense of humility, to smash that false ego that falsely thinks that we can accomplish everything we are accomplishing today without anyone, without anything, and without any support. Now, the moment I heard that and I read that, I thought, this makes so much more sense. If I had known about it as I started my first coconut, it would have been a lot easier to go through it. So sometimes all we need to do is take a step back and ask questions. So asking questions is never wrong. It's never a sign that we are doubting someone. But if it's taken well, it's a sign that we're trying to learn, that we're trying to move from ritual to spiritual. That's what asking questions is so important. The other thing that's important about now being spiritual is simply the word. It's very interesting. When you look at ritual and you put the word SPI, it actually becomes spiritual. So there is spirit in every ritual. It's an action that can appear mundane, but it can become deeply meaningful. Meaningful. Just taking someone you love for a walk. You take a child out for a walk. I remember when my children were young, I just took them for a walk around HDB flats because I was living there. Normally, myself taking a walk along HDB flats, not a big deal. I'm just walking. But when I took my son out, it just changed everything. Suddenly, the HDB flats and everything around me looked so nice. Why? Because I had my son with me. It had some meaning to it. A ritual that starts with no meaning, if you look deeply and you find meaning in it, it can become very, very fulfilling. That's why people who feel spiritual are very often, to put simply, they're very satisfied, very happy, and they're very contented. And that is something you can't bluff someone, isn't it? You can try very hard to tell someone I'm very happy, but eventually we all have lived long enough to know when someone is happy and not happy. A ritual can bring boredom, but spiritual, that's different. How do we get that? When we place more concentration, more focused, more heart into something, then the scriptures tell us that activity becomes spiritual. And when that activity becomes spiritual, our faith also grows. That's the other thing that's interesting. If you go back home, I'm just giving you ideas today. You don't have to agree, you don't even have to disagree, but the idea is to take it back home and mull over it, contemplate about it. The other important thing the scriptures tell us is that when you put faith in an activity and you start believing in it because you understand its meaning, the value of it also grows exponentially. And when it grows that way, you learn to feel so much more a sense of worth as you perform it. And when you're spiritual about an activity, this is very important. It crosses the boundaries of what we would call today as gender, race, creed, religion, caste, all of these. All of these are known in our scriptures with two words, material designations. Look at all of us, we're all here. But very often, right, you find that we are defined by our material designations. I define myself as a lawyer. I was introduced as a lawyer. But I'm not really a lawyer. There's just one hat I wear. And yet a material designation can become so important that eventually it consumes us. But being spiritual, you cut across races, you can cut across religions, you can cut across so many different bias and prejudice, because the activity itself becomes important. Not who is performing it, not their background, and not where they come from and how much they earn. When we start having such a spiritual view of life, you find that you can look at the next person next to you, and you can find a lot of your prejudice that we all are growing up with or are born with, they can actually go. That for me is a very important value of being spiritual. And when we perform an activity with a spiritual outlook, then we understand what is the meaning and the symbolism. And that's why this idea of being spiritual is so important. And we thought Diwali is an important time for us to understand why we do it, why we celebrate it. And that's why we have come to this point. Now I'm going to give you a very beautiful verse. And this verse is from a very famous personality from the Mahabharata. Some of you may know the Mahabharata. It's a very famous epic, right? It's the world's longest epic, actually. If you've studied European history, the closest you come to the Mahabharata is actually the Iliad by Homer, okay? The Mahabharata is the precursor to all modern day soap operas. Every soap opera you've seen today with all the twists and turns, the Mahabharata had all of it and even more. But the beauty of it was always centered on the idea of spirituality. And one of the central characters there is Kunti Devi. She is a queen, and she actually had 5 sons who were what we would call the heroes of the Mahabharata. They were known as the Pandavas. But despite the fact that they were supposed to be the rightful heirs to the kingdom, by providence and by arrangement and by all kinds of different things, they ended up in the forest. They ended up losing what they were rightfully what they would rightfully have owned. So in fact, Kunti was a queen who led actually half her life not as a queen. And she suffered very much in exile. But she was always a devotee of Krishna. And she has a beautiful prayer that I thought would actually crystallize to us what spiritual actually means. In this prayer, she chants, and I'm just going to read the translation. O Lord of Madhu, that's a reference to Krishna. As the Ganges forever flows to the sea without hindrance, let my attraction be constantly drawn unto you without being diverted to anyone else. The thing that's really important here is that even though Kunti was in so many activities that were difficult and challenging, her focus and her single-minded determination, the one purpose that gave her life was that she wanted to be devoted to a cause. And that cause for her was devotion to Krishna. But she gives us a hint. The hint here is this. She uses the word attraction, if you notice. But if you know Sanskrit, she actually gives us an idea of how we become attracted to something. That's very spiritual. The biggest problem I find people always coming to me and saying is, when I start something, it feels very attractive. But after a while, how do I sustain attraction? It's very difficult to keep sustaining attraction to something. It's the nature of the world. Something looks beautiful today, tomorrow it deteriorates. Something looks wonderful today, tomorrow it deteriorates. Kunti gives an idea. She says, the word that she uses is matir. You see the word there, M-A-T-I-R? The word matir actually means to be attentive. And then you look at the next line, she used the word ratim. Ratim in Sanskrit means to be attracted to or attractive. So what Kunti is saying is, if you want to make something less ritualistic and more spiritual, be attentive to it. Start by being more attentive to what you are doing. Put your heart into it. And eventually, that which you are attentive to, you become attracted to. It's an interesting concept to think about. And that's why this particular verse is very important. Now, Kunti speaks of this point. And the characteristic that comes for us to move from ritual to spiritual are only 2 things. 1, we should have the conviction to look beyond what we are simply doing. And 2, we should have the single-minded determination that if we take up something, we are the ones, it's in our hands to give it life and to be attracted to it. If you simply wait for something to always be attractive, you and I know by nature, it will never be. But if you wear the correct lenses to approach something with attention, you will find you become attracted to it. Very important. I remember when I was young, all the subjects I became attracted to were incidentally the subjects I paid good attention to. And the ones I never paid attention to, I just lost hope in them. Because no attention meant no hope of even being attracted. When you start a relationship with someone in the beginning, when you say you love somebody, what do? You're very attentive to them, isn't it? Oh, I buy you flowers, I get you this, I get you that. You watch out everything. And that attention to them sustains your attraction. But the moment you make that a ritual, you become less attentive to who they are, what they want, and you become more attentive to what you want, then your attraction for them actually keeps going away. Think about it. Very interesting point from the scriptures. There's another beautiful story that makes ritual and spiritual very interesting. It's the story of the blind man who was reading the very famous Bhagavad Gita, which is considered to be the quintessential Vedic and Hindu scripture. This is a very interesting story that happened hundreds of years ago. And there was a personality who is non-different from the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Some of you may have heard of him, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu was walking down this place, very famous place known as Gaya. You all know where it is. It's very famous in India. And he saw a blind man standing and reading the Gita. Now, Mahaprabhu didn't know he was blind until he walked closer to him and realized he was holding the Gita upside down. And normally, if you're not blind, you should know how to hold the Gita. The second interesting thing was, he was actually crying. So Mahaprabhu goes up to him and says, "My dear sir, why are you holding the Gita in this way? And then why are you crying? Is it because you're holding it this way, or is there any other reason?" And the blind man, he replies very nicely. He says, "My dear sir, I'm holding the Gita and trying to read it because my spiritual master gave me the instruction that if you become attracted to the Gita, all problems of life will be solved. But unfortunately, I'm illiterate. I don't know how to read the Gita. But I have faith in the words of my spiritual master because I think what he's telling me has a deeper meaning." So then Mahaprabhu says, "That's very nice. You have faith in someone and you're holding a very important book, even though you can't read it. But my question now is, why are there tears in your eyes? Are these tears of regret? Or is it simply the fact that you feel that, I just feel sad that I can't read the Gita?" And the blind man said, I can't read the Gita, but my spiritual master has spoken about the Gita. And when he spoke about the beginning part of the Gita, of how Krishna, who is non-different from God, could actually sit down and become a mere charioteer and allow Arjuna, his friend, to actually move him and direct him, just like a simple charioteer should be directed. The tears come to my eyes because I realize here is a personality who's so great, who's so ready and humble to become a servant of another. When I think of this great scene, my heart becomes very inspired and the tears come. And Mahaprabhu declared to everyone, many people are reading the Gita, but many people don't understand the essence of it. The essence of it you have felt. Even though you could never read the Gita, you are not doing it because it is a ritual. You're doing it because you want to understand what is its true meaning. And you do not have to be unblind, or you don't have to have sight, physical sight, to actually realize the essence of something. That is such a beautiful way to explain ritual and spiritual. Diwali. It's a Vedic festival, thousands of years old. It's commonly referred to as the Festival of Lights. It's celebrated by Hindus throughout the world as a time of celebration. It's merrymaking, and we all seek blessings from our elders. I don't know how it is with you, but when I was younger, Diwali for me meant one thing. Going around visiting all my relatives, and I have a big family in Singapore. And at that time, I was very young, and all my family members were highly generous. So some years, my collection was really good. Some years, I remember one year I hit $1,000 or $1,200. That's the highest I ever got. But as I got older, right, it deteriorated. And once I got married, it ended. But yeah, that was my take on Diwali. But normally for Diwali, most of us would take an oil bath. If you don't dip yourself in a bath full of oil, well, your father would take a bit of oil and put it on your head and say, that's your oil bath. Mm-hmm. Then we say our prayers in the morning. We visit the temple if we can. Otherwise, we have altars, which are temples at home. We do our prayers there. We always take blessings from our elders. That's an absolute important thing. We spend time visiting our families and friends. At least we do it a lot in Singapore. And we light lamps. And over the years, you don't do it like India where we have fireworks. But in Singapore, in pockets of places, you see people trying to do this. So that's generally what we do in Diwali. The spirit of Diwali is actually deeper because it's actually the triumph of light over darkness. It's also a time of reflection, contemplation, not of others, but actually of ourselves. It's also a time to contemplate about who we are. Because when light conquers darkness, there must be a purpose to it. Where are we? Are we in darkness or are we in light? Are we in knowledge or are we in ignorance? So the question of who we are as individuals is an important question. The other question the scriptures ask us to ask is, what is the purpose of our lives? Another Diwali has come, another birthday has come, another year is passing. It's November now. I remember, I think all of you would have felt when January 2018 started, we have a year ahead. And before you know it, the year is ending. So what is the purpose of our life? These are questions that move Diwali from just a ritual to something more spiritual. If you look at the Vedic scriptures, Diwali also means certain things. In many parts of India, and generally speaking, we understand Diwali as the time to celebrate the return of Lord Ram after he conquered and vanquished Ravana, and when he came back to claim the kingdom of Ayodhya. And after he came back, the great rule of Ram, known as Ram Rajya, actually began. So that is a very important significance of Diwali. The other one that's also very important, and also celebrated in parts of India, is actually that it was on Diwali day that Krishna vanquished another demon. And this demon was known as Narakasura. Very powerful demon, was causing havoc in the world, and Krishna actually conquered him and he vanquished him. And by doing so, he brought peace on the day of Diwali. Sometimes we ask ourselves, what do these pastimes mean? Apart from being literal, what do they teach us? Both of them tell us one thing. They tell us that actually, when you replace darkness with light, the idea is actually to bring the presence of the Supreme into our lives. And when you bring that presence in, it has the effect of dissipating the darkness of ignorance. And this darkness of ignorance is very often symbolized by demons, or what we would call demonic forces. Sometimes they have names, but very often it's not the names that count, it's the qualities that are important. Ravana, for example, ran after something that wasn't his, and that was Sita. And how many times do we run after something that isn't ours? I'm not saying you all run after other people's wives or husbands. You don't have to do that. But if you run after something that doesn't belong to you, and you know has no place in your life, then your whole life is a life of a chase, and you never get it. So the question also is, what are we running after? So the significance of Diwali is that very often, Lord Ram, Krishna, and all these great, great personalities, supreme personalities in our scriptures, it's also about establishing a connection, something deeper, between not just who we are, but also with our Creator. It's also about establishing a connection with everyone who's seated here. Sometimes when you're in a family, you have brothers and sisters, but you'll find that the person who holds the family together is very often vis-a-vis a parent. And that's why when we speak about who we are vis-a-vis ourselves, it's also important to ask ourselves where we come from and what is our connection. And once the connection is established, then the idea of transgressing darkness to light is actually about putting aside unwanted habits, unwanted qualities, and growing into becoming a better person. If spiritual life does not make us better people, then spiritualism can very quickly degrade into a ritual. We can go to the temple on Fridays, and on Saturdays we do everything that we can't do in the temple. We can go to a place of worship and become the best that we are. But the real test is when we come out of the place of worship. Are we the same as we are inside, within the four corners of our walls? That would make it spiritual. Otherwise, it has the capacity to become ritual. And every young generation gets very tired when you tell them, go to the temple and pray. Because they'll tell you, we know so many people who go to a temple and pray, and when they come back, they are hardly what you would expect of temple goers. The question they are asking, every generation asks, I asked that in my generation, you asked that in your generation, is because of this. What is our real connection? Is our connection merely to something which is very superficial? Or is our real connection to cross over things that we should not stand for and to become better people? Very few of us actually know that there is a third pastime. There's a third significance to Diwali. And we thought that this year we should actually introduce it to you, because we don't hear of this very often. Or even if we heard the pastime, we never thought it had to do with Diwali. But actually this pastime actually happens on Diwali day, right? It's smack in the middle of Diwali day. And it's a beautiful pastime. It's very sweet, but as we hear it for a few minutes, we'll also come to realize that it has deep significance. And we thought if we shared this with you, you would maybe go back and appreciate the significance of what we have heard today and try and make Diwali, in one sense, even more meaningful. And going beyond Diwali, perhaps use some of these things to understand ourselves better. That would make it less ritualistic. So the pastime is actually the pastime between Krishna, who in this pastime is known as Damodar, and his mother, who's known as Yashoda. And this pastime happens on Diwali day. So I'm going to tell you the story. You sit back, you relax, and you tell me what you think of it. So on the morning of Diwali day, what happens to all of us? We're normally trying to put on the best clothes we can, and we are either going to receive visitors or we're going to go out. So it was no different in Vrindavan. And Vrindavan was the place where Krishna was. And Mother Yashoda woke up in the morning of Diwali, and she thought, you know what? I'm going to give Krishna the best present of Diwali. And Krishna loved, when he was a baby, everyone knows, he loved butter, right? Krishna always had this habit of stealing butter, you know. And I don't think the butter that he actually used to eat at that time is the kind of butter you and I get in the supermarkets today, because it was definitely unprocessed, it was natural, and as you can hear from the pastime, it was churned. I think many of you who have come from India, you would probably have seen not so long ago, even your grandparents or maybe even your parents, you know, actually tried to do this. So Mother Yashoda woke up in the morning thinking, let me give my son the best butter. She had a problem with Krishna. Krishna's problem was, Mother Yashoda had the best cows. She had the best butter, the best yogurt, the best cheese, everything. But the problem is her son kept going to everybody's houses except hers to eat butter. Imagine your boy or your girl, every day for lunch, you prepare good lunch, and then they go over to a neighbor's house and eat. After a while, if you were a mother, you have serious issues with self-confidence, self-esteem, and wonder what is happening with me as a mother. So Mother Yashoda was very concerned about her son, because he kept going to everybody's house. If you go to people's house and invite yourself in, okay, not so bad, but at least you invite yourself in. He didn't do that. He would steal butter from them, which made her even more seriously concerned, because she thought if my son grew up at this rate, he would become what we would call in law a juvenile delinquent. And she was worried. So Krishna was actually a very small baby at that time, and he was sleeping in the morning. So Mother Yashoda said, this is the best time to churn. She looks around for her maidservants, but they were busy. So she thought, why should someone else do something out of love? If you love someone, you wouldn't ask someone else to do it for someone you love. You do it yourself, isn't it? It's the ultimate expression of your love. So Mother Yashoda said, let the maidservants do what they want. I'm going to simply churn butter for my beloved Krishna. And she started churning. Now this looks like a very ordinary activity. And it is, just like the activity of sitting down and hearing a lecture could be. But Mother Yashoda elevated this activity to a different level of consciousness. Why? Because as she was churning butter, she was remembering the pastimes of Krishna. And she was feeling so much for Krishna in her heart and her soul, that even though, actually, if you think about it, churning is a very strenuous activity. I tried doing it a few years ago because I was fortunate. I was in a village in the Gujarat, Dwarka area. There are some villages there that still churn butter, okay? And I actually tried it, and believe me, it's better than a workout in the gym. And I remember my spiritual master telling my wife, you don't need to go to the gym if you did all this, because that's how they stay very trim and fit. Anyway, it's not an easy activity. And Mother Yashoda kept doing it. It was actually very strenuous. And the scriptures tell us, and I have not written it here, she was perspiring, a beautiful sari was becoming disheveled, flowers at the back of her hair was actually dropping. Normally we don't want to be like that. But she was happy. She was smiling, she was absorbed, because she was remembering the pastimes of Krishna, and she was appreciating him for what he is. This is so important in a spiritual activity, when you appreciate what you have. If you don't appreciate what is there, it very quickly becomes ritual. And even before you know it, something which was inherently good will lose all its luster, because we don't have the gratitude that we have, and we have lost the appreciation of it. When you look at people you love, and you look at them through the lens of appreciation, your love for them is never ritualistic. it becomes highly, deeply spiritual. And Mother Yashoda did that to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that's why she enjoyed thinking of the son. And in Bhagavad Gita, there's a beautiful verse where Krishna actually tells Arjuna, those who work in devotion to me. In other words, whatever that you do, it doesn't matter what activity you're doing. Remember, Arjuna was not told by Krishna to retire from the battlefield. He wanted to retire. He said, let me become a sadhu. Let me go to the cave. Let me now tender my letter of resignation. Krishna refused to accept it. He said, no, you have to fight, because at this moment your scope of duty and your occupational engagement is to be a warrior. So you have to fight. And Krishna told Arjuna, your nature is that you're a fighter. If you go into the cave and sit down and pretend to be a holy man, just give yourself 1-2 days. You start fighting with them. Because your nature is inherently to actually be a warrior. So Mother Yashoda was an ordinary person. She didn't have BSc, MSc, she had no degrees. She wasn't a great devotee in the sense of transcendently knowledgeable. She was simply a mother. But she was simple in her thinking. And that's the other thing that's important in being spiritual. Have you noticed how we complicate our own lives? We really do. Sometimes we look at someone and we think, he's not smiling at me. And before we know it, we start speculating, oh, he's not smiling at me because of this and that. I'm looking at all of you, and believe me, my mind is jumping from here to there. She's smiling at me. My lecture is well received. He's looking at me very fiercely. I think I should cut down my lecture. This is how we react to everyone. We speculate. But Mother Yashoda did not speculate. She simply endeavored for her son. Krishna was asleep, and she was remembering him. But because he was remembering him, in the scriptures it is stated that Krishna is none other than the super soul in our hearts. We have this saying in many, many religious faiths that God doesn't just reside outside, but God also resides as a silent witness in the hearts of everyone. In Vedic terms, it is known as Paramatma, or super soul. So because Krishna is accepted as a super soul, he could understand his mother's love for him, and he could understand that churning of butter was not ritual. And because it was highly spiritual, he wanted to come out and reciprocate with her. When someone reciprocates with you, it becomes a very meaningful relationship. And that's what happened. And because he appreciated, Krishna comes out and he touches his mother, and he indicated to her, because he was very small, he couldn't speak so well, he indicated to her that he wanted 2 things. Stop doing all that you're doing and give me milk, because I'm hungry. So Mother Yashoda was very happy, because for her, this was the height of her ecstasy, to feed her child. And the scriptures tell us that she put him on her lap and she fed him very nice. And as she fed him, she did one thing. She just kept looking at him and appreciating him. It's so important. In today's world, I've seen mothers breastfeeding their children, and they're handling the phone, handling the text, and handling everything else in the world. And sometimes it's so difficult for them. They tell me that. It's so difficult to appreciate the simplest points of motherhood, because we live in a difficult time. Mother Yashoda didn't have phones and anything else to distract her, but she had the ability to concentrate on the beauty of the son's face. But then something came up, and something always comes up anyway in life. She had put milk on the stove, and it was threatening to boil over in the kitchen. What is the milk for? The milk was for Krishna. If the milk boiled over, it would be burnt. If it was burnt, what would happen? She would just lose the opportunity to feed him good milk. But if she put Krishna down, then you all know, little babies who are not fed very well or completely, what happens to them? They throw what we call the tantrum, right? Before my son was born, I was told by my cousin, because she had a son before that, she said, you should watch how children throw tantrums. It's amazing. And when I saw my son throwing a tantrum, I realized, wow, this is like a tornado. So Krishna was playing the perfect role of a baby. And when she put him down, she thought, I need to save the milk. Never mind, Krishna may get a bit angry with me, but I can quickly come back and feed him. But I can't wait if the milk goes off. So difficult decision, but she puts Krishna down, she goes into the kitchen. What happens to Krishna? Krishna is left in a state where he's not fully satisfied. So Krishna decided, I'm the perfect child, right? So the perfect child doesn't mean I'm always good. The perfect child means I must also throw a tantrum. And this is what he did. So he decided, now that mother has left me down, he became very transcendently angry. He looked around him and he saw that there was a pot and there was butter in it. So he decided, let me punish my mother. How should I do that? I'll break the pot. This is what happens when you put me down and I'm not satisfied. So he breaks the pot, and then after breaking the pot, he realizes, now mother would be very upset. So Krishna thought the best thing to do now is don't hang around. Better run away. So what does he do? He hurriedly leaves the scene. The moment he leaves the scene, Mother Yashoda comes back hurriedly because she's worried for Krishna. But lo and behold, she sees the scene of a crime. Because the butter pot is smashed, there's butter all over the place, all the hard work in the day is now gone, but Mother Yashoda is smiling. It's quite amazing. Why? Because as she was looking at all this, she decided and she thought that fine, let me see. Yeah, it's over here. She thought to herself, my boy is very intelligent. Sometimes mothers, they love their children so much that when you think that they should discipline them, they find something very nice in them. And they say, no, this is very nice of them. I've also felt that. Sometimes I see my children, they look really, really cute when they're angry, but of course you can't tell them that. Because that means, they will keep doing it. So you don't tell them that. Mother Yashoda was by herself. She was upset on one sense that the pot was broken, but then she's beginning to smile. And she thought, Krishna's very smart. He's run away because he knows I'm going to punish him. So Mother Yashoda thought, let me pick up a stick. You see the stick there? Mm-hmm. She thought, I'll bring the stick with me. I won't hit him. But sometimes when you show a stick, children have a way of coming around. I don't know how life is today, but when I was young, my mother had various implements of possible torture. I remember the feather duster somewhere in the house. I remember the cane somewhere in the house. I remember the belt used to be, moved up and down. Nothing ever hit me, but it was hanging around. And mother was very strict. She was a teacher, and I was in the same school. And never have a mother who was a teacher in the same school. Okay, that's just side information. Now, what happened to Krishna? Mother Yashoda thought, I'll take the stick, and today I will put a stop to what he's doing. How to follow Krishna? Very simple. The scene of the crime had footprints, because Krishna had stepped on butter. So she just followed the footprints all the way into the storage room. And in the storage room, there were pots and pots and pots of butter. And they were all hung up in the ceiling so that Krishna could not get to them. But when she reached there, she found an amazing sight. Krishna was somehow or another sitting on a wooden grinding mortar. Now in those days, they had this big mortar. It could almost be my height. And if you sat on it, you would be able to be quite high. Krishna was sitting on it. It was upside down. And what was he doing? He was taking butter, hanging from the top, and he was actually feeding it to his very good friends. Now his friends in Vrindavan, Krishna had a few friends. He had the gopis, who were his young friends. They were girls. He had the boys, the gopas. And then if you've been to Vrindavan, you will know that Vrindavan is full of monkeys. Many, many monkeys, even till today. I was in Vrindavan last week, and whenever you go to Vrindavan, the problem is your glasses. If you're not careful, the monkeys are very quick. Before you know it, a monkey this big could come down, pick up your glasses, and you wouldn't even know you had no glasses until you realize I can't see anything. Okay, it happened before. And I remember walking around with no glasses because my degrees are very high. I've got astigmatism, I'm colorblind, so I practically cannot see anything. I wanted to go into a shop to buy something for the deities, and I complained to the man, and I said, I can't see anything in Vrindavan, and I feel so bad. And you know what he told me? He said, don't see Vrindavan with your eyes. See Vrindavan with your heart. And I thought, wow, this is spiritual. This is not a ritual. And here he was just selling cloth and selling everything. And there I was in Vrindavan thinking, I'm a devotee. I've come here to pray. And I think he thought to me the value of what it means to be spiritual. Mother Yashoda saw Krishna, and he was being very happy with his monkey friends. And while he was feeding them butter, they were happily taking butter. And while they were eating butter, Krishna was looking this way and that way. Why? Because he knew his mother would come for him. So he was just being a little bit conscious of his naughty behavior. This is a nice picture. So as the monkeys were eating, Mother Yashoda thought, there's such a nice relationship between the monkeys and my son. Of course, there's some, similarities also in the way of their mischief, but there's such a nice relationship. Now the scriptures tell us these monkeys were not really monkeys. In scriptures, we give them a very respectful term. They are known as vanaras. These monkeys that you see in Vrindavan at that time with Krishna, in his past incarnation as Lord Ram, these were the same great souls who assisted him in the battle against Ravana. Some of them were great personalities like Hanuman, Sugriva, and they were all very, very great devotees of Lord Ram. They served him very well. And when Lord Ram finished his pastime at that time, he turned to all of them and said, "You have served me so well, and your relationship with me is so deep. Let me ask you, is there anything I can do for you moving forward?" And they only asked for one thing. They didn't ask for anything else in the world because he was great enough to give them that. But they asked for something deeper. They said that what we want is an eternal relationship with you, an eternal connection with you. We want that connection never to go. So if the next time you come again to this world, you please bring us back with you so that we can always be connected. So we don't want to do this because we have to do it, because we are monkeys. We want to do it because of an establishment of a connection. And that is the greatness of these great Vanaras. And the Lord gave them a wonderful benediction. And that's why I'm quoting to you this very famous verse from the Gita. Here Krishna says, "Ye yatha mam prapadyante tam stataiva bhajamyaham." As soon as anyone surrenders to Krishna, and surrender is not a bad word, by the way. If you're in the corporate world, yes. If you're told to be submissive, surrender, people will tell you, oh, they will eat you up for breakfast. But in our Asian culture, and I'm not just talking about Indian culture, but Asian culture, because we study Asian culture, you'll find that one who is genuinely humble naturally will attract the attention of the greatest teachers. If you had a student who was naturally humble and asking for knowledge, you would be the first teacher to grant him that knowledge. As teachers, you know that. And when you have a student who challenges you on the basis of ego and nothing else, then you understand the spirit of the student, that he's not there to learn. He's not there to establish a connection with knowledge. He's just there to make a point. So this point is important. So the Lord says, anyone who surrenders to me, I will reward them accordingly. The word reward here is given a deeper meaning. It's not reward in terms of money, because money goes. It's not reward in terms of anything material, but it's reward in terms of a deep connection. And that is an important point. This is a very long verse, but don't worry about it. The verse is there. And by the way, if you all want these slides, you can always talk to Vishal. I'll be very happy to share them with you, right? I'm very happy to share them because they're very helpful. In this verse, this is a verse sung by Hanuman. It's beautiful in Sanskrit. We can sing it. Na janmanunam mahato na saubhagam navam na buddhi na kritistesha hetoho nairyad vrishishtam apino vanaukasha chakara satye bata lakshmana grajaha. So Hanuman and all the Vanaras, the monkeys so to speak, this is their prayer. They say, my Lord, we have no qualifications. Hanumanji and everyone else, they never studied like we do, never went to NUS. They don't have a house where they could invite Lord Ram. Hanuman says, I can't even invite you home for prasadam or dinner because every night I live in a different tree. I don't even have the proper parentage. I'm not born in high parentage. In fact, I'm just born a monkey. I don't even speak your language. I speak the gibberish of the body in which I'm born into. But despite all the lack of my qualifications, O Lord, you are so kind that you have kindly accepted me as your friend. And when we reflect on our lives that way, that's when we develop a connection. You notice that this entire prayer is a prayer of gratitude. And gratitude is a very important component of making an activity ritual and moving it into spiritual. Appreciation and gratitude. So that's why the monkeys and Krishna had such a deep relationship. Because Krishna, as Lord Ram, promised the monkeys, when I come back as a little boy in Vrindavan, I will be known as Krishna. And when I come back, I promise you, you will all come back and you will look like monkeys in the forests of Vrindavan where I stay. But nobody needs to know what we have. And when you see me and I see you, our relationship will be revived again. And while you served me so well in that life, in this life, I will serve you. And that's why Krishna was breaking butter from the pots and actually giving it to all these monkeys out of his own hand. It is a reciprocation of relationship. Of course, it all ended when the monkeys turned around and saw that Mother Yashoda was standing in front of them. Monkeys were the first ones to see, because Krishna's back was to the entrance of the room. And what happened? The monkeys all scooted off. Of course, when they all ran away, and Krishna thought, wait a minute, what happened to our deep relationship? Something has happened, isn't it? So then he turns around and he realizes, aha, it's my dear mother whom I have a deep relationship with, but right now I'm not so excited about it because she has a stick. And when he saw that, he gets down from the grinding mortar and he begins to run. Now, Mother Yashoda thought, my little boy is going to run. How fast can he be? I can surely outrun him. Mothers, you must have had experience of running after your children. You will realize that some of them can really run, right? They can give you a good run for your money, so to speak, but you eventually catch them. So Mother Yashoda thought, not to worry. It's Diwali day. Already he put me in so much trouble churning the butter. I was so tired, I endeavored, but I was so happy. Now he wants me to run after him, let me run. But the more she kept running towards Krishna, the more Krishna eluded her. She just couldn't catch him. That's a beautiful picture. She would almost get him, and then he would scoot away. She began to tire. Her endeavor seemed overwhelming, but Mother Yashoda was determined. She was single-minded, and she was focused. And that's the difference between doing something out of ritual and doing something because it means something to you. You will endeavor, you will put in the effort, and it will be sweet, even though it is laborious. And when that happened, she chased him to all corners of the house because the house was quite big. But don't forget, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Mother Yashoda is a devotee. There are thousands and thousands of yogis and sages and personalities who are trying to run after him and catch him by way of meditation. But the scriptures tell us nobody can achieve him without his mercy. There are many, many demons who wanted to kill Krishna, as you saw in Krishna stories. They were all running after him. But even as they ran after him, they could never catch him. Who was Mother Yashoda? She was not as educated and as qualified as any of these personalities. But her reason for running after him was correct. That is spiritual. She ran after him as a mother. And she ran after him with no motive, except to genuinely correct him, because the basis was always love. So she chased him, and he refused to yield. But in other words, even though Krishna cannot be caught by anyone who speculates about him, he finally decided, when he saw his mother working so hard to catch him, he thought, my dear mother, she has nothing in her heart but love for me, appreciation for me. And even though I don't deserve this, she is my mother. And he decided, let me be caught now. And at that point, Krishna stopped, and Mother Yashoda caught him at last. After catching him, this is a beautiful verse that is stated at the point of capture. The verse comes from an Upanishad known as Katha Upanishad, and it says that the Supreme Lord cannot be obtained and understood by expert explanations. Whatever I explain now may seem expert, but he may not appear before us in our hearts. You cannot know the Supreme just because you have vast intelligence. Even if you hear very much, it may not happen. But he's only obtained when he chooses the person. And how will he choose? Based on the reciprocation of relationship. You ask yourselves this question. Every one of you all have the freedom to decide who you want to be related to. Someone may chase after you, someone may not chase after you. But ultimately, you will decide on the basis of how much you can reciprocate with the other party. It is the most natural thing in the world. And that is what the scriptures tell us. So now Mother Yashoda has caught Krishna. And Krishna becomes very, very scared. Why? The stick is still in the hand. And Krishna thought he's going to be now chided. And that's how children become very scared of mothers when mothers threaten some kind of punishment on them. The scriptures tell us he became so scared that as a little boy, he started shivering. And because he shivered, he had so much gold on him. Krishna was like a walking jewelry shop, especially it was Diwali day. So, he had so much jewelry on him. So as he shook, everything started shaking. If you read the scriptures, the details are amazing. They say that he had earrings which were shaped like sharks. And as he shook, the earrings also shook. They also say that, he was anointed, his eyes were anointed with mascara. And because they were anointed with that and he started crying, mascara, kajal, they started going down like rivulets, like water, and he became extremely scared. When Mother Yashoda saw this, her heart melted. Your hearts would melt too. She thought, now my son is unnecessarily afraid. I didn't come to punish him, but he's still going to become a juvenile delinquent at this age. So I need to do something for him. So what do? She decided, let me not use the stick. I never wanted to use the stick, but I need to do something. Let me try and keep him still for a while. Keeping a child still is also very difficult. If you achieve it, all glories to you. Mother Yashoda decided, let me do something. You see, she had that mota that she had. She decided, let me tie him now. Tie him for a while, let him become calm, and then the rest of Diwali he can run around. So Mother Yashoda thought, let me now bind him with ropes. She threw away a stick. She thought she'll get some ropes, and then she decided, let me tie him now. Now, can she tie baby Krishna? She was thinking Krishna is very small. And well, as a child, he's not very plump. He wasn't in the obese category or very plump or anything. Krishna had a little bit of a tummy based on the scriptural reference to him, but nothing you couldn't solve with, a few feet of rope. So she got the rope and she tried tying him. And as she tried to tie him, she found out that something happened here. What happened? As she tried to bind him with the first round of ropes, she found that the rope came up to his belly 2 inches short. She thought, okay, fine, let me get some more ropes. She gets some more ropes. She brings them to the end, 2 inches short. She thought, okay, fine, we have a big house. Let's get more ropes. So by now, all the maidservants, some of the neighbors, they're all starting to come out. And they're looking with amusement that baby Krishna is so small and there's so much of rope that it's not going to tie him. Mother Yashoda is perplexed. But for the third time today, right? First time was when she wanted to feed him and she churned butter like anything. Second was when she wanted to run after him and she ran like anything. And third, she wanted to bind him. But the more and more rope she got, she found that she could not do anything. But she was not discouraged. That's an interesting point in the scriptures. She endeavored. She was not discouraged because she did this on the platform of love. And therefore, instead of becoming discouraged, she became another D. She became determined. But she was also astonished. How was this happening? Because Mother Yashoda was trying to bind. She was becoming tired. She was perspiring. The garlands were falling. And when Krishna again saw the hard labor of his mother, and being very compassionate upon her, and knowing that she is the most loving mother that he would ever get, Krishna decided, now that she has caught me, I will also allow myself to be bound. This relationship is a very deep relationship, because our scriptures tell us that Krishna was playing the part of a human child in the house of his great devotee mother, and he was performing his own pastimes. And it's always stated that no one can control the Supreme. But even though no one can control the Supreme, when a devotee establishes a sincere connection with the Supreme actually becomes so enamored, so pleased, that he actually will forget his own position of surrender, even as the devotee never forgets his own position of surrender. That's a beautiful point. So the Lord, in this case, he felt pleasure by submitting himself to the love of his mother. You see the difference? He did not submit himself to his mother, but he submitted to her love. And when we perform something out of love, out of contemplation, out of depth and feeling, you will find that that activity becomes so much more meaningful. And if that activity involves others, a group activity, you'll find that people also become inspired and they also reciprocate. And that is why Krishna surrendered to his mother, even while his mother surrendered to him. And I really like this verse that I wanted to share with you from Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the Bhagavad Purana. This is a prayer that tells us how this science actually works. You read it and it sounds really interesting. This is a prayer by a devotee. The devotee says, Lord, you cannot be conquered by anyone, but you're certainly conquered by devotees who have control of their mind and their senses. Mother Yashoda was not a great yogi, but because she was concentrating on Krishna, automatically her senses were controlled. Look at all of you now, whether you like it or not, and I'm almost done. And even if you're thinking that it's time he stopped and I should have some good food outside, for the last better part of 45 minutes, you have endeavored very much to stay focused. You didn't stay focused because you needed to, but because you decided, let's sit back, let's contemplate. And when you do that, you find that you are automatically controlling your mind and your senses. You've been a great audience. No one has gone to sleep. No one looks very bored. Everyone is more or less smiling at me. So I'm very grateful. But this tells you one thing. It is not difficult to control the mind and senses as long as you are engaged with your heart. The moment you're not engaged with your heart, your mind is everywhere but the place where it should be. And that's how the secret to mind and control is given. And that's the advantage of making something spiritual. Because the real advantage is you regulate your life. And the scriptures tell us the devotees, because they control themselves to serve the Lord becomes so pleased that he allows them to control him. You see the reciprocation? Very nice. So the significance of 2 inches, that's also beautiful. The scriptures tell us there is a deep meaning to why the rope never actually met, for a while at least. The first inch is the sincere endeavor of the individual. When you want to move away from doing something ritualistic, it doesn't mean you stop working hard. Sometimes people come and tell me spirituality is about living the now. It's not about doing anything. Mothers who hear you become very worried. When I started becoming more involved in spiritual life, my mother thought that I'm going to now renounce my studies and become a sadhu. But I had to point out to her that it's all about doing something better and not running away from it. And when she saw that my results were all right, then she decided it's all right. You can wear your dhoti and you can wear your kurta. Because when I started wearing all these things, one day she came up to me when I was 14 years old and she told me, Siva, I just want to ask you a question. Will I ever have grandchildren? I asked her why. I'm 14. No, it's because, if you go on like this and you look like one sadhu and you start wearing these things and you don't study very well and then you don't get married, and I only have 2 sons and the other son also wants to be like you, then you know where it's going, right? So I told her, no, it's not like that. It just means that whatever activities that we do, we endeavor. But we endeavor sincerely, but we know why we're endeavoring for it. We just don't do it because we have to do it. That's the key. The second inch is the mercy of the Lord, which means the reciprocation. That's all. It's sincere endeavor attracts the reciprocation from the Lord. You don't believe in God? Some people tell me that. Then take him away from the equation, put a person there. Equation still works. Sincere endeavor in any relationship will attract the proper reciprocal exchange. It will. Generally, it always does. And this is the significance of the 2 inches. The only thing in this verse I want to tell you is the first line. Established social positions. No one's telling you to renounce everything. Diwali doesn't tell you to do that. Mother Yashoda was not told by Krishna, stop being a mother. No. He only encouraged her to be the best mother you can be. That is being spiritual. So Mother Yashoda did not bind Krishna with her own abilities. She bound him simply by putting a heart and a soul into her endeavor to serve him. And that is the marriage of ritual and spiritual. Because today, I don't want to conclude by saying throw away rituals and just be spiritual. The word spiritual has ritual in it. Why? Because you'll always have to do something repeatedly. All of you hopefully will bathe every day. All of you hopefully will brush your teeth every day. It's a routine. All of you will come to NUS and study every day. But how much of every day will you put your heart in? That's the spirit part of the ritual. You can't get out of it. But now we come to the end of the pastime. Mother Yashoda had bound Krishna, and Krishna was left there, and she thought, okay, fine, I've done my part. But Krishna was thinking to himself, actually, nobody can bind me, maybe for a while. Then he saw 2 trees at the back of his garden, and he thought, let me be mischievous, and let me walk towards the tree, or crawl towards the tree. But Krishna was bound to a big mota. How was he going to move? He's God. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he thought, Mother Yashoda thinks that she can keep me here. But now I will do something more mischievous than before. And he began crawling towards the tree, dragging the heavy mota behind him. As he passed between the tree, the mota got stuck because he's very small. But when he pushed very gently, the mota pushed both trees behind and they came down with a crash. The beauty is, as the trees came crashing down, the scriptures tell us in their place stood two beautiful beings, very effulgent, and they bowed before Krishna. So Krishna said, "Who are you and why are you here?" And they then began to say their history. And their history is very interesting. They told Krishna, in the past, we were the sons of Kuber. If you know anything about Vedic culture, you'll know Kuber is the lord of wealth, right? Wealth. So he's generally the chief treasurer, and he's an important man. If you know the treasurer well, then well, good luck to you. So Kuber had two sons, Nala Kubera and Manigriva. Imagine if you're the sons of the treasurer. Generally speaking, you become a bit lax in life because you think your father has a lot of money. But they were the same. Unfortunately for them, instead of using their life, valuing it, they spent most of their time in frivolous activities. And they were very, very forgetful of who they were. They became intoxicated and very proud. And one day, they became cursed by Narada. You see Narada? A very famous sage, very famous devotee. Narada was walking by the lake one day, and these two young gentlemen were so intoxicated they had no clothes on. When they saw Narada, instead of being at least decent, they just came out in their glory of nakedness and bowed before him in a very subordinate manner. Now, when Narada saw that, he felt compassion for them. So he said, "Let me now curse you." Now, when a devotee curses someone, it's not really a curse. It's meant to take you out of what appears to you to be a blessing. So what he did was this. He said, "Since you two have no need for clothes, I desire that in your next life you become trees." Because normally you don't wear clothes on trees. Trees are quite happy without any clothes. So at that point of time, the two gentlemen decided, "Narada, don't be so harsh on me. Don't be so harsh on us. Don't make us trees. Or even if we become trees, let us come out of it." So Narada said, "I now pray." Narada stopped there, and this is not in the slide because it's important. Narada prayed very hard. That Krishna, I pray that somehow or another these two young men will learn to understand their place in the world. And I pray that they may become trees, but they become trees in the same courtyard where you will be. And one day, maybe thousands of years later, I pray that they will come in contact with you and they will be delivered of their pride and their intoxication. So this was a devotee's prayer, a well-wisher, thousands of years before this pastime. And they became trees in the courtyard. And when Krishna finally enacted this pastime, he did not forget the promise and the prayer of his devotee Narada. That is also a deeper, stronger relationship. Here was a relationship with his mother Yashoda on Diwali day. But the Lord doesn't even forget a devotee who prays for someone else's benefit, even if it's not on Diwali day. And this is what he tells the young men. And I love this verse. He tells them, "You two young sons, I have nothing to do with you. You were just trees. You didn't pray to me. I did not know you. But Narada is very dear to me. And therefore, because he wanted me to come face to face with you, I must do so for their deliverance." And that's why when relationships are actually deepened, when we understand why we do something, the goodwill that you get from it is very powerful. Very powerful. It may appear subtle in the beginning, but you will realize that it goes a long way. In the business world, I tell my clients, it's not the best, most astute businessman who will make money. It's the businessman who has the best goodwill. It's the businessman who builds the deepest, meaningful relationships. They are the ones who really go far, because they never even take their activities as a ritual. They actually put their heart into it. So now, what's our conclusion? The conclusion is simple. Narada Muni and Yashoda Mata, they both had one common thing with Krishna. They had a relationship with him. But you notice in their dealings, the relationship was never a formality. It was never ritualistic. It was always from the heart. And the heart of Diwali is this connection between who we are and where we have come from. And when that connection is established, then the scriptures tell us that Diwali actually becomes very meaningful. Just like the roots of a tree. If it's watered, then the rest of the tree actually gains nourishment. It is the personal experience of many of us who practice this principle that we don't have to worry about our family, we don't have to worry about other relationships, because We get the basics of one most important relationship right, and then we extend it beyond everything else that we see. And that makes a lot of difference. This is a very important verse that Krishna advises Arjuna. And this is so important because it speaks about the connection that is spiritual. Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, if you're not connected to me, in that case it was Krishna, then you will not have transcendental intelligence. Your mind will also not be steady. And if your mind is not steady because your connection to an activity is simply ritualistic, then your mind will run. And when your mind runs, there is no possibility of peace. And he ends very nicely. If there is no peace, how can there be happiness? That's a beautiful point. If you want to become peaceful, peace is the doorway to happiness, actually. So how do we avoid anything from becoming a ritual? You all will have so many other realizations, but I thought I'll just share some of it that the scriptures give us. Do it from the heart. Meditate on it sufficiently. Appreciate the activity. Understand the purpose, why you do it. Don't do it because you have to do it. Do it because you have a reasoning behind it. Repeatedly perform an activity. We do that all the time. But put your heart in it. Maintain the right focus. Sometimes people tell me that's so difficult to do. I tell them, yes, it's difficult. But that's why you should not think about something. You should go deeper to contemplate about it before you perform it. Thinking, then comes feeling, and then comes willing. You all thought, maybe we should come for the Diwali program today. It was a thought. Eventually, the thought graduated to, I feel like coming. And because you felt like coming, you are here now. You have willed yourself to be here. And do it in the company of like-minded people. This is so important. One person is very difficult because you can be washed away by a world which is ritualistic. But if you gather like-minded people, you find it's different. I always say, in the company of drunkards, even if you drink mineral water, eventually you have to drink alcohol. But in the company of saints, even if you're drinking alcohol, eventually there's a very good chance you will start drinking mineral water. That's the power of association. And remember one thing, spiritual does not mean whimsical. We need to be organized. The Bhagavad Gita is so much about structure. Arjuna, this is your scope of duty. You are breaching it by running away. Get back to the battlefield and fight. That's organized. But fight with the right spirit. Don't do it because you have to do it. And you can only do this if you're sincere and you're submissive. And I like this last advice from Narada. He says that I began chanting the holy names of the Lord. Because sometimes we say, why should we pray? Why should we chant? Every religion gives you the idea that we should chant the holy names because they are very powerful and they are mantras. But the reason why we chant is given here. When we chant the holy names of the Lord, we become connected to something which is more spiritual than religious. Because it doesn't matter where we come from when we chant. Chanting is chanting. The names of God are the names of God. God has many names, but chanting is chanting. We all can go and take a drink of water, but in all our languages, water will sound different. But the taste of water and the quality of water will never change. That's the beauty of chanting. And when we chant submissively, with the heart, we become free of material designations. Remember I told you that at the start? And that's the biggest challenge. And when we do that, three things happen to us. We become satisfied with what we do. There is satisfaction. We also learn to become humbled in our attempts. And hopefully, we're not envious of the person who's sitting next to us. In fact, we become appreciative of that. And this is another way in which we can look at it. This was the great elephant king, Gajendra in Bhagavatam. He was in big trouble and he prayed very hard. How he prayed is very important. He fixed his mind in his heart with perfect intelligence. Sometimes people say, how do I make my mind and my heart work together? This is the answer. Whatever the mind thinks about, if you want to fix it in your heart. When people tell you, how do I know if I'm feeling something with your heart? Believe me, you don't have to go for a seminar for that. Everyone knows how to be sincere. It's just what you are sincere about that actually is the difference. Nobody says, I feel something with my kidneys. Nobody says, I'm telling you out of my liver. We always say, I'm saying it out of my heart. Because the heart is the seat of our sincere attempts. Maybe not successful, but sincerity is more important than success. Success is only notching figures. Sincerity is a boat that crosses a difficult ocean. Thank you very much. I'm sorry I took so much more time, but sometimes these topics are so beautiful, and if I try and just cut them down, then it may become a ritual. And that's why I thought, let me try to speak as much as I can with my heart. I want to thank all of you for your time. I really do. And our meeting, I always believe, is never an accident. There must always be a reason why two people meet. And if you look deeply enough and you learn something from it, as much as I also can learn something from it, then I think we all come out of it much richer. So from my side, I want to wish you all a very meaningful Diwali, which is coming up. You have a good time, get all your all bath done, get plenty of money from your relatives if you can, squeeze as much as you want, have a good time, but never forget why we are here. And sometimes pull the brakes on your car, sit back, and enjoy a deeper meaning to life. Okay? Thank you.
So now we'll just do about 10 minutes of kirtan, which is mantra meditation. One of the very powerful ways to establish the connection which Prabhuji talked about.
Before I do this, would everyone like to chant for 5 minutes? Yes. Can I try doing that? Yes. Okay, that's good. Okay, just for 5 minutes, let's just chant a mantra. Man means mind, and tra means to rest. Mantra is any spiritual vibration that gives someone who tries to chant it the great opportunity for the mind to find a resting place. The nature of the mind is compared to a deer.